Okay, welcome back. In this video, we will be focusing on two files that have kind of been lurking in the background a little bit. They are known as the Bootstrap.ini and the CustomSettings.ini files. And these files really control a vast majority of how the installation is going to deploy. And ultimately, it will decide whether your deployment fails or deploys successfully. So first we have to find the files, and they are located inside your share. So I'm going to open up my Windows Explorer, navigate to my drive that my share is on, and remember we're calling this new MDT. So I'm going to open this folder, and inside the control folder there is going to be two files, and the Bootstrap.ini and your CustomSettings.ini. They should be right next to each other. Now we're going to edit them. I'm going to use Notepad++ to edit these. And I already have them opened up, so I'm going to go to my Notepad++. And the first one we're going to take a look at is our Bootstrap.ini. Now this is a blank template that I've prepared for this video. So as you can see, we have our settings section with our keys and our values. And then if we look down at the default section, we can see that we have a few options that are blank and ready to be filled in. So there is a skip BDD welcome, and this is the welcome screen that you will find when you start the deployment process. Whether you skip it or not really depends on the following lines of code that we haven't got to yet. So let's take a look at those, and we'll come back and decide whether we want to use our BDD welcome or not. So the deploy root is the share from which we are deploying from, and the share we're using is new MDT, and it is on an iMac. So we're going to go ahead and type in the address for that with our / command, our server name, another /, and then our share name. And our share name is new MDT money sign. Alright, moving on, we can see we have three lines of code: user domain, user ID, and user password. And these will allow us to skip the logon process when we start the deployment. So we plug in our flash drive, we boot to our flash drive, and then it's going to connect to our server, and it's either going to prompt us for these three, or we can put these three lines of code in and it will log into the server using this information right here. So for example, our domain is Springfield, so we can use SGF. You can also comment this one out if you don't want to use this one, and you can skip it. And when you go and enter your username, let's say my username is John12, which that's fake, by the way, and I'm on the domain SGF, I can type it like this, or I can do the other method, which is to put SGF / and then your username, and then the password will be completely exposed, so I'm not going to type a password in here, but that's where you'd put it. So I'm going to erase these, and say we want to log in, and we actually want to do it ourselves, and we don't feel comfortable leaving our credentials exposed inside this text file. So we can go ahead and comment these out with a semicolon, which grays them out, and then when the computer goes and reads this file, it will actually read these as a comment and not an actual line of code. But we still need our deploy root, because this will prompt for the credentials. And since we're skipping these, we can go ahead and say no, let's not skip the welcome screen. In fact, greet me and let me know that everything is working okay. So we need to save this, and that is pretty much it for the Bootstrap. The Bootstrap is just for the logon process of the deployment. Next, we'll take a look at the CustomSettings.ini. This one has a lot more detail within the file itself, so it's going to take a little longer to go through and kind of explain what is happening here. Again, the computer's going to start, going to look at the settings, and then it's going to read the properties, and then it's going to go through and read each one of these. And the priority is the following. It's going to look for the model, and then it's going to look for the serial number, then the MAC address, the task sequence, and so forth. It's going to start at the top of the priority list. The priority list starts with model. We don't have a model section set up if we scroll down, but we do have a MAC address section. So since the priority is default, it's going to read this section last. Say I had a build 8.1 base, which is not on this list, it won't read this at all. The buy is on battery, however, is kind of important. Let's say that we had a laptop that wasn't plugged in, and it might not have enough battery life to make it through the full deployment, because the deployment uses a lot of energy as it's writing tons of information to the hard disk. So it'll come here, and if it sees that the buy is on battery is true, it'll go to this section right here, and then it'll tell it not to install the operating system. It's kind of a safe fail to prevent something from going wrong in the first place. Now looking down, we're going to skip this section. I'm not applying any GPIO packs, so let's say it goes to the default section. code. We're going to tell it deployment type, new computer, no GPO pack. Remember, everything grayed out with a semicolon in front of it is a comment, and it's not a line of code that will be processed. We're going to tell it to hide the shell, and right here I have a comment that says logging, which means that the next few lines of code, which appears that there's 2 of them, are going to be pertaining to the logging area. Now if you look here, this equal sign is directly against the precursor, and this one has a space. It doesn't matter, you can keep spaces in between or not, because as you can see up here I have the same scenario going on. It really just depends whenever I wrote the line of code whether I was lazy and put a space in there or not. The space makes it cleaner to read compared to this, but it's not necessary. It will still do its job. So I have 2 lines of code that I need to fill out for my logging, the SL share and then the SL share dynamic logging. The SL share is just the location of where the logs are going to be stored, and these logs are going to be stored on my server and inside my share new MDT money sign. That's all I'm going to put for this section. For my next section, I'm going to put my server, my share name, and then I'm going to put my logs inside a folder called logs. And after logs, I need a way to organize the logs for each computer that I deploy. So I'm going to create a new folder, and the folder is going to be in relation to the computer name for each model that I am deploying. And I'll show you an example of this. I have it pulled up right here. If I look at another share inside my test share, I have a similar folder called logs, and inside the logs folder, which is where I'm at, is the computer names. So for example, I have a computer that I built on 2/12/2016. I named it Rebuild. If I go inside, I can see that all of these are the logs that were written during the deployment of this machine. The BDD has most of the information in it, and that's where you would really want to look if you're having some major issues. But as you can see, it is very difficult to read, very compact, and lots of clutter, and it's very long. So you may want to consider using third-party software to do that. Okay, so closing that, we're going to carry on. We see a very important line of code right here. It's the OS install, which is the operating installation command. Now generally, as if you look up here, you see that this command uses yes, or this one uses no, but the OS install does not use yes or no, but Y or N. But we want our operating system to install, so we're just going to leave it as Y, but not yes. We don't want to choose yes. Then we're going to tell it to skip our admin password, and then we're going to call our admin password test share. But let's not call it test share. Let's just call it, for the sake of this tutorial, new MDT, all lowercase, and no money sign. We're going to go ahead and skip our product key because we're on a KMS, but we're not going to skip the BDD welcome screen for this. Whenever it formats the hard drives, we have the option of giving it an extra partition for, say, backups or whatever we feel like. But since we have a bunch of network access shares and the cloud, we don't really need this option, because if the computer crashes, no data should be lost, since the user should be backing up everything either on their own or on the cloud. So we're going to skip this, and we're going to skip the computer backup, and we're going to go ahead and skip BitLocker because we don't want to spend a lot of time encrypting the hard drive. Next, for our recipe, it's going to choose a task sequence, and we don't want to skip the task sequence unless we're doing it for a particular model. So for example, since the default section will be read after everything else, say it's going to go to our priority list and we get to a MAC address right here. Now I can go down here to our MAC address, which here's a MAC address. You get it at the BIOS when you start the computer up. You push F2 or escape or delete or whatever it is for your particular model. For Dells, I know it's F2. And you can go in and find the MAC address and write it in here as a section. You can then come in here and set all the video information, which our resolution is 1600 by 900, a 60 hertz refresh rate. And we can also tell it to skip the computer name, and we'll call this Rebuild. Remember that computer called Rebuild that we just looked at in the logs? This is actually the MAC address for that particular computer. So since I'm using a MAC address, say this computer is specialized for a particular task. So if this is a regular office machine for a professor, I can go in here and actually assign a task sequence. And let's take a look at our workbench and look for a task sequence. It looks like we have one here called Office Build 8.1, and inside that the task sequence is Office 8.1, and the task sequence ID is Office _8.1. 8.1. So I'm going to take this task sequence ID. I'm actually going to put it into my custom settings file for this particular model. So when the deployment process starts and it goes through this priority list and it reads the MAC address here and it goes, oh, we have a match. This MAC address matches this MAC address that I wrote down here. So we're going to use all of these settings and we're going to use this task sequence. Therefore, the task sequence that we skipped up here, right here, does not matter because it's not reading that until after it's already decided what task sequence to use. So if we want to give it an admin password, this is the local password of the administrative account. Whatever you want it to be, you can leave it blank and do it later. You can take care of it in your auto unattend, or you can just type something in. We'll call it new MDT all lowercase just for the sake of this tutorial. Not very secure, but again, just for the tutorial. So since we made some changes so far, let's go ahead and save so we don't lose our progress. I'm going to scroll back up to where we were. Okay, so we're not going to go ahead. So again, we're not going to skip the task sequence because if it doesn't find a MAC address, then we want to be able to tell it what task sequence to use. And we don't want to skip the computer name, which means it'll actually prompt us during the deployment to name the computer. And we can skip this again if we choose to. User data location is auto, and we're going to skip the locale section. Skip time zone and give it a time zone, and skip apps on upgrades, and we pushed no, but we skipped application install yes, so we're not going to install any applications during this time. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. We got some keyboard. The rest of it is pretty straightforward. It's just user locale, UI, keyboard, and all of this will come after we've already installed the operating system, but while it's preparing the image for logon during, I think, the first reboot or the second reboot. We can then tell it to skip domain membership, and we'll put it on manually ourselves, and we'll skip the final summary because we can look at that in our logs. And for the basic monitor settings, we're going to give it these. Now the event service is how the deployment workbench can actually monitor the deployment while it's occurring. If you go to your monitoring tab right here, and it'll show up, oh, look, I have one that was actually done, I believe, today, and it took 15 minutes, 100% complete, and it tells you what step it's currently on and how many steps are total. So this one has 53 steps. And if you want to refresh it, you can tell it to automatically refresh this information every 10 seconds, and it'll update the step and the status of the deployment. You can also come here and right click on monitoring and you want to refresh it after you start deploying the image. So that way, if it didn't recognize that the image is being deployed, you can kind of force it to do it manually. So going back, we need to tell it where to look for this information. And our event service is going to be located on our server, IMAX. And then we're going to do a colon sign and then the port number. And the port number that is generally used is port 9800. Pretty standard, and it works. Then we're going to go back up here and we're going to save again. The home page is the home page that you use for Internet Explorer. So you can actually do this through group policy with a GPO pack, or you can do it here. You can also do it in your auto unattend .xml file. Since the option's here, we can go ahead and do it here. Now the SMSTS org name and the SMSTS package name will actually show up during the deployment process. Okay, so here's a screenshot of a deployment that's currently in progress. And as you can see, we have two sections here for College of Education, and it says running Windows 8.1 x64. So if we go back to our Notepad++, we can actually see that I have College of Education in Windows 8.1 64 base image. Let's snap this over here, and I'm going to snap that over there. So you can see how changing these two right here will actually change them on Paint. And that's pretty much a basic rundown of what the CustomSettings.ini file does. In our next video, we will cover updating the share settings to make sure you can access your share remotely via // commands, and that will be the final step in ensuring that our image is ready for deployment. We will then update our share and prepare to deploy the operating system. So I will see you in the next video.